executive session. So I appreciate that. The public can attend tonight's meeting in person at the George DeCiaro City and County Buildings Council Chambers located at 1 Tacoma Drive, or watch live on Channel 8 and through live streaming on Broomfield's website, broomfield.org/live. The public may also participate in public comment either in person or by calling 855-695-3744 and pressing *3 to be placed in the queue for comment. Screeners will ask callers for their first and last name, neighborhood, and the agenda item the caller would like to comment on. If you'd like to speak on more than one item on tonight's agenda, you'll need to press *3 each time to be placed back in the queue for comment. Public comment will be limited to 90 minutes total per item. The first 1 through 15 participants in the queue have 3 minutes to speak. The next 16 through 25 participants have 2 minutes. And if time remains, the next 26 plus participants in the queue have 1.5 minutes to speak. If joining in person, we'll ask you to come to the podium and state your name and neighborhood for the record. For our hearing impaired residents present, we have wireless headsets available through our AV team in the back of the council chambers. The City Council regular meeting is called to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Anderson. Here. Cohen.
Here.
Hinkle. Here. Jezierski.
Here.
Leslie.
Here.
Lim. Here. Lindstedt.
Here.
Marsh Holshin.
Here.
Schaff.
Here.
Ward.
Here.
Thank you. A quorum is present. Will everyone please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In an effort to keep order for tonight's meeting, I ask council members to limit their comments to 5 minutes. If council members are given an opportunity to speak for a second time on an item, they should limit their comments to 2 minutes. We'll plan on a 10-minute break at approximately 8 p.m. We'll begin with council's review and approval of this evening's agenda. Council may add or remove items from the consent agenda, or council may revise the order of business for a meeting. Does any member of the council have any comments or questions regarding this evening's agenda? Seeing none, are there any objections to this agenda being approved? Seeing none, this agenda is approved. The first item this evening under petitions and communications is a proclamation declaring October 2022 as National Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Will Bonnie Steele and any other staff members here come to the podium to accept the proclamation and meet Mayor Pro Tem Jezierski? Well, welcome, and would you like to go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Yes, I'm Bonnie Steele with Child, Adult, and Family Services.
I'm Tiffany Ramos. I'm the manager for Child, Adult, Family Services.
Sinemi Rooney, Safe House Progressive Alliance for Nonviolence.
I'm Ann Tapp. I'm the executive director at Safe House Progressive Alliance for Nonviolence.
Hi, Erin Shannon, also Safe House Progressive Alliance for Nonviolence, or SPAN.
Good evening. I'm Linda Seidenstick, and I am the Victim Services Coordinator.
Hi, I'm Eric Frederick, Commander of the Investigations Division of the Police Department.
Thank you. This proclamation recognizes the pervasive issue across the city and county of Broomfield, the United States, and the world regarding domestic violence and its implications for personal and community health. Domestic violence does not discriminate and touches all communities, regardless of age, race, disability, gender, identity, or socioeconomic status. Research shows that by creating communities where people are connected, supportive, and care for one another can reduce incidents of domestic violence. Therefore, as mayor, I hereby declare and proclaim October 2022 as National Domestic Violence Awareness Month in the city and county of Broomfield. and invite all residents to use this month to raise awareness and increase the prevention of domestic violence in the Broomfield community. We'll now proceed with public comments. If there's anyone who would like to comment on this agenda item, just come on up to the podium. Any members of council have any comments or questions on this item? Bonnie or the rest of the staff, would you like to make any remarks?
Yes, thank you. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council, City and County of Broomfield. Thank you for acknowledging such an important topic. Domestic violence is a risk factor for children being safe within their homes, and the consequences of living with domestic violence dynamics is tremendous. This is why CAVS, Child, Adult, and Family Services, has prioritized having improved training through the Safe and Together model for all of our staff. We continue to make strides in better practice with the support of our community partners, including SPAN and Broomfield Police Department.
Good evening. I'll make my comments brief. I just wanted to acknowledge that you sort of see what a partnership looks like. And, you know, there could be 50 people out in the parking lot who I easily could step in and talk about how important it is for us to work collaboratively as a community. So on behalf of SPAN and the more than 1,000 survivors that we work with from Broomfield each year, I just want to acknowledge the work that these amazing folks have put into really developing strong collaborations that support families experiencing violence. And I think in many ways, the City and County of Broomfield are on the cutting edge of really looking at deeper, more creative ways that we can impact not just serving survivors and their children, but actually reducing the prevalence in our communities. So thank you so much for all of your support. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you. We appreciate all of you and the important work that you do for our community. Thank you for being here tonight. The final item this evening under petitions and communications is a presentation regarding the Boulder Valley School District bond measure. Rob Price, Assistant Superintendent of Operations for Boulder Valley School District, will provide the presentation this evening. Mr. Price?
Yes. Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and council members. I'm Rob Price, Assistant Superintendent of Operations for Boulder Valley School District. And tonight I'm here to share information on ballot question number 5A. I'm going to wait for the presentation to pull up if you don't mind. While they're pulling that up, the Facility Critical Needs Plan describes $350 million in capital improvement needs. This plan is the reference document for November's ballot question number 5A, asking voters to consider authorizing BVSD to sell bonds to invest in our facilities to address these critical needs. Next slide. To begin, I'd like to share some of the highlights of what we accomplished in Broomfield because of the 2014 bond improvements. Around $78 million was invested overall. This included a brand new school for Emerald Elementary School. Air conditioning was installed at Birch Elementary School, Broomfield Heights Middle School, and Cole Elementary School. And thank you again for your contributions with CEF funds to allow us to complete the air conditioning at Cole Elementary School. And then significant work was completed to improve the learning environments at each of these schools in Broomfield. Next slide. We've identified $350 million in critical needs that need to be addressed in the next 4 years. And this work falls into 4 major categories: maintaining our aging facilities, building additional capacity for enrollment growth in Erie, expanding our career and technical education options to better prepare our graduates for post-secondary success, and improving ADA access on our playgrounds. Next slide. The first major category is maintaining our aging buildings. Next slide. BVSD owns and operates 61 buildings that total over 4.8 million square feet. And these buildings range in age 1 to 140 years old, with our oldest school being Whittier Elementary School. Half of the BVSD schools in Broomfield average over 40 years old. Broomfield Heights Middle School is right on the verge at 39 years old. Most of our buildings still have decades of life thanks to previous bonds. However, we still have systems and major equipment that needs to be replaced. And in some cases, when a building has aged to the point when the cost to repair and renovate is significant enough, it makes more sense to replace the building rather than continue to invest in it. And as such, the critical needs plan calls for the replacement of the 70-year-old New Vista High School in Boulder to be replaced with a new building similar to what we did at Emerald Elementary School. Next slide. These are just a few examples of what the assessment identified as needing immediate attention. At Broomfield Heights, we have building envelope issues. This is similar throughout the school district. We have site paving issues throughout our schools, and then mechanical equipment needs to be replaced throughout the district. Next slide. Delaying this critical work will allow conditions to deteriorate while costs escalate. That's why it's important to do the work now. So as equipment systems age, the risk of major failures, which could significantly disrupt the school day, increases. And addressing these needs now will reduce costly emergency repairs in the future and will avoid disruptive impacts to the learning environment. Next slide. In addition to the major maintenance projects, there are projects to expand access to our playgrounds and reduce the amount of hazardous materials in our buildings. So as you can see from this photo, playground mulch on a number of our elementary school playgrounds will be replaced with rubberized surfaces that are wheelchair friendly so that students of all physical disabilities or physical abilities, can play and exercise. Our third major category is investing in career and technical education. Next slide. And then one more, please. Next slide. There you go. Earlier this year, community leaders gathered to discuss how to improve Colorado's K-12 education system. Employers want education to align with workforce needs, and we've recognized that we need to do more to meet this challenge. Next slide. The future of work continues to evolve. According to a report authored by the Institute for the Future, 85% of the jobs that will exist in 2030 haven't even been invented yet. In a rapidly changing world, our students need learning experiences that go beyond the traditional classroom environment. I think back to our schools that were built in the 1930s or the 1950s, like Broomfield High School was. If you think about it, those impacts, those environments haven't changed much, but when they graduate, we expect them to go work for a Google or a similar industry. So our environments need to change just like the working world does. Next slide. So this slide shows the detailed list of critical needs and how that money will be spent on schools. I'm going to run through this quickly. Priorities 1 and 2 is our deferred maintenance, approximately $160 million. $36 million will go towards replacing New Vista High School. We're removing some hazardous materials in our buildings. New school in Erie is $40.9 million. Expanding CTE opportunities at our secondary schools throughout the entire district, $22 million. We'll renovate Boulder Tech, $21.4. We'll build out a new teaching kitchen that will benefit current technical education for $845, improving ADA access for $6.8, and then we have money for inflation and program reserve totaling up to $350. If you look over to the right-hand corner, a $350 million tax increase will cost approximately $983 per month for a home valued at $600,000 or approximately $20 a month for a home valued at $1.2 million. For a business, that cost is $68.64 per month for each $1 million of non-residential property value. Next slide. So this slide shows the proposed investment at each Broomfield school. Much of the proposed work will go into major maintenance and repair of our building systems. And then some of our elementary school will have the playground mulch removed and replaced with rubberized surfaces. And then renovations, as I talked about on career and technical education, renovations at Aspen Creek, Broomfield Heights, and Broomfield High will create industry-inspired learning environments to give students essential hands-on work-related skills and experience. Next slide. So the final slide, just want to leave you with a couple of closing comments. The critical needs plan approved by our Board of Education is both responsible and aspirational. Major maintenance and facility improvements will allow us to continue to provide safe, comfortable, and learning environments. And the proposed renovations in career and technical education aspires to build a stronger bridge between education and the worlds of work and college. so that our graduates are fully prepared to successfully transition to whatever the post-graduation path may be. If you want to learn more about our critical needs list, the website is listed there. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Belval for a real quick comment.
Hi, I'm Virginia Belval and I live in Ward 4. Do I live in Ward 4? No, Ward 3, Devin, thanks. And I'm here because Rob can't ask for your support, but I'm a citizen and I can. And so I hope that members of City Council will consider supporting this bond initiative. It's really important for our community and our kids. And I can't say anything more than that. Thank you for your presentation and your time.
Thank you, Ms. Belleville and Mr. Price. We'll take public comment now. If anyone who would like to comment on this agenda item, please come up to the podium. Any members of council? Councilmember Henkel?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Price, and thank you for your presentation. You were very concise. I'm impressed.
5 minutes.
I was part of the Adams 12 Leadership Academy and still involved in a lot of Adams 12, bond initiatives. And I think one of the primary questions that we always get, I know the answer to this question, you probably know that, I know you know the answer to this question, is everyone asks, how come marijuana money does not pay for this? So do you want to provide a quick explanation? Otherwise I might receive 10 emails as to why doesn't marijuana pay for this?
That's a great question. Last I checked, marijuana taxes raised about $40 million for the entire state of Colorado. And as you can see, that doesn't even fund one school based on our initial projections. So there isn't near enough money out there from the marijuana tax. And the state of Colorado doesn't provide us with funding to continue with our capital improvements across the district. That's why we continue to turn to our taxpayers to ask for help. We essentially just don't get the money from the state of Colorado.
Thank you. Yeah, there's also an application process and those sorts of things to get that money. So yeah, thank you.
Anyone else? Councilmember Schaaf?
Thank you, Mayor. So school bond philosophy, kind of why we do this. The BVSD taxpayers already pay BVSD money every year. And how come there's a request for even more money? And it comes down to school bond philosophy. So if you can give just a little snippet and why we do this.
So I'll go back in time a little bit, and I'm not going to go back too far, but 1998, there was a bond measure. 2006, there was a bond measure. 2014, there was a bond measure. And we're back today in 2022. And again, it goes back to the funding that we get from the state of Colorado. There just simply isn't enough to maintain our buildings, build new facilities, update our facilities to match what we need to do to provide a safe and comfortable learning environment for our students and staff. So that is the philosophy, is we just don't have the money. So we do believe that it's the responsible thing to do to turn to our taxpayers and leave it up to our taxpayers to make the decision if they believe this is the best decision to move forward.
But then those BVSD taxes that are paid every year, that's primarily for operational costs, not capital.
That is correct. Yes, yes, that is correct.
The 2022 bond measure that you presented tonight, is that going to be additional bond money and tax dollars above and beyond what was already approved in 2014?
That is correct. That'd be $350 million above and beyond what was in.
But that 2014 bond measure has expired or will expire?
That work is complete. Now that was a 30-year bond. All of these are 30-year bonds. So the idea is we have a mill and we try to maintain that mill pretty steady. Even though it'll increase, we're able to layer that upon. So, financial advisors guide us on that work to make sure that we're not raising taxes just by any means possible, that we're pretty smart trying to keep taxes down as much as we can. But those are 30 years. So that 2014 would be a 30-year bond.
Okay. And then the last question, with the 2014 bond measure, did the proposed, and I mean, I really appreciate kind of the transparency and kind of the ability to see exactly what's on that detailed list. With 2014 bond, did that detailed list match what was constructed, or was this vastly different in the end?
So 2014, we had a master plan that went through that. And again, on each project, we have a design advisory team to make sure that we meet the scope that was promised to the voters. And then we had a citizens bond oversight committee that really watched the financial oversight of that. And that was all the way through. And then they presented our citizens bond oversight committee, which was made up of parents, residents of all of our communities throughout the district, would present to the Board of Education on a quarterly basis. So they could provide the oversight. The board understood where we were at within the bond. We managed that bond to 1%. We were able to air condition 27 schools that were not originally called to be air conditioned. That's something I'm really proud of, knowing what global warming and everything else is doing and how hot it's been through the month of September, extremely important. So a lot of work that was completed outside of the bond scope that ran through those design advisory teams and through our Citizens Bond Oversight Committee.
Great. Well, thank you. I mean, I think that, you know, the idea is that you've built a credible track history, you know, within the taxpayers and within BVSD. You've continued to support students with these dollars and that you ensure the transparency of public dollars as well in terms of that bond oversight committee. You know, just speaking from personal experience, I've been in many of these schools that have had AC added to them. And it's a big difference, and especially with our district to the south in Denver for the first part of the school with them not having AC, what a difference that does make for the learning environment. So thank you for this. I want to ask my attorney, is the bond measure, is this about a bond ballot measure? Is this something that council as a whole can support, or is this something that we would support individually?
Councilmember Schaaf, this would be individual. We can't use city resources to support or oppose a ballot measure. We also got a question if this is on improper electioneering. We're actually more than 150 feet from the current drop box now. So our council chambers is in a weird position that sometimes when we're in active election mode, we're too close to the ballot boxes for this to be for this to be electioneering. So I wanted to address that question as well, although I know it wasn't yours. But to be clear, this is an informational item. Only you as individuals can do what you like with this ballot measure.
Okay, all right. Great. Well, thank you for that. Then thank you for the presentation. Thanks, Mayor.
Well, on that, hold 1 second, Councilmember Leslie. We have taken formal positions of support for ballot measures before. Yeah, we did for an Adams 12 bond measure a couple of years back. So might want to.
And Mayor, my focus is really on city resources. So I can look at the history.
We didn't go out and campaign, but
Right,
we did
right.
pass a formal.
Like a
support.
resolution?
Yeah,
Okay, I'll follow up with the city manager. And we can bring that back to council.
perfect. Thank you. Councilmember Leslie.
Thank you. Mr. Price, I'm curious how much had to be cut to get to the number that you are actually proposing to the voters? Because normally you don't start with 200 and build it up to 350. You start with 900 and you cut it down to 350. What was your?
That's a great question. So we hired a third party that came in over the last couple of years, did a facility assessment. They identified $670 million worth of needs over a 10-year period. Now, those first 2 years is what's included in this. Now, we polled our community. We polled at 350, 400, and 450. So we went with a smaller package because a lot of tax measures on the ballot this year, and we had the most support for the smallest package. So when I look at it as you want to say cut, I mean, it was really around $100 million that we took out to get to the $350 million package.
Yeah, you're proving my point. There's more there that needs to be done.
Significantly more.
You're not going to be able to do all of it. Some of it, because it's going to be preventive maintenance related issues, are going to continue to increase in cost.
Yep.
And so you're going to have to come back again in the future. This is not solving all of the problems of the school district in one fell swoop. So,
Wish it were.
yeah, thank you.
Yes. Thank you for the comment.
Thank you. Any other council member questions or comments? Well, I appreciate you being here tonight to raise awareness and for our wonderful resident advocates. So we will take this up.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
And Mayor, if I can clarify, my apologies. Well, we were both right, I guess.
Okay.
No resources can be used, no city funds, but council can take a position on a measure similar to, as you mentioned, the Adams 12.
Awesome. Thank you, Ms. Rogers. Thank you both. We'll be in touch. You good? Oh, go ahead, Councilmember Schaaf.
Thanks. So what would the process look like for that? I mean, if this is something that, you know, I felt strongly about, which I do, do I need to request a Section 18? Or what would the process look like for that to get a council resolution on the support for this?
Oh, okay, at the end. Feels weird doing it now. And petitions and communications right now? Wow, that's awesome. Okay, anyone opposed? Or are we all in favor of supporting this bond measure?
Bringing back a resolution.
And bringing back a resolution of formal support? Head nods, good. All right, done. I love efficiency. Thank you. I love it. All right, now we'll start with in-person public comment. We have some special guests waiting to speak. So after they come up, if anyone else wants to speak on topics not on the agenda, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. But we have some guests and it's our friends of Broomfield.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Manager's Office, and City of Broomfield. My name is Gina Kofel. I live in Broomfield, and I am the founder and CEO of Friends of Broomfield. We are 24 years old. We are a local nonprofit agency serving adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We do this through our day program, our independent living program, our social and travel program, and supported employment. I am here tonight with some of my friends who are representing a variety of their favorite Disney, Pixar, Universal, and DreamWorks movies. And the reason is because we have a special fundraiser coming up. We have to fundraise 25% of our budget every year, and we do this through 3 major fundraisers. But our longest running and most favorite fundraiser is our annual variety show. Our variety show is grown to 22 soloists who are participants in our programs and who perform favorite songs of their choice. And tonight we are here to represent those characters in costume. We would like to personally thank you for being part of our show last year when we did Friends Rocks, and you all, or many of you all, performed in our Walk Like an Egyptian video, which was so much fun. A different side of council we got to see, which is really fun. But we're back this year to invite you to this year's show, which will be on October 15th. At noon, and it will be a video presentation of our favorite movies at the Alamo Draft House. So if we could, we would like to ask permission for our friends to hand you these invitations so that you may join us that day.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gina. We got giant invitations. I thought we were getting the boards. That's really special.
An award?
Yeah.
We should have brought an Oscar for you because it was fantastic last year.
Well, we appreciate the personal invitation. So that's October 15th at Alamo Draft House.
At noon.
Okay.
Yes, yes. And we promise that you will have fun, be greatly entertained, laugh a lot, cry a lot, and hopefully remember us this year. All of our friends are very, very special. They're very talented, and you really don't want to miss this show.
I agree. I've never been disappointed.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gina. And thank you, friends. Come on up. Don't be shy. Thank you. That one. Okay. You look great. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so once again, one last call, October 15th, Alamo Draft House in Westminster, starting at noon. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was public comment, so we're not doing public comment on public comment. I got a little messed up. Any other public comment? Please step up to the podium and state your name and neighborhood for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Chris Church. I'm from Ward 3. And I don't know if this is the correct venue. I just got home from deployment and I read the article on the new gun issues. That's the study session. I don't know where to go with that, but anyway, in reading all the proposals, there's a lot of vague and ambiguous issues. Now, I understand there's 3 other cities involved with this, but is there going to be a greater definition on any of these items, or is this just AKA what's an assault weapon? Or it's asking for background checks, but you've already received a background check when you legally purchased the firearm. So there's just quite a few items, such as in the proposal under 972-35, where it's actually put in a lot of private property instead of city property. So, which I don't understand where the city council can deem that, where they can make a judgment call on private property. Once again, under 97235, under D4, that section totally contradicts a lot of the areas listed in section B of that on private property. So I've just got, those are just some points. I'm just got home and just started reading that and it's like, well, this doesn't make sense. I understand it's an election year and we're all trying to it's an election year item. It typically is. So that's pretty much where I am on the whole issue.
Well, could I recommend that you send that in an email to us,
Sure.
to council at Broomfield City Council? We can address your individual questions.
Oh, not a problem. Not a
Okay.
problem. Okay. Just to the whole council?
Yeah, that's the best way to
Not a
do it.
problem. Not a
You'll
problem.
have more time to get your thoughts out too.
No, that's fine. I mean, I just got home a couple of days ago and saw this article, so it's like, anyway, so we'll go
for
from
your
there.
service,
Thank you.
and let us know what else we can do. to
Not a
help.
problem. Thank you.
you,
You'll receive it in
sir.
the next few days.
Okay. Anyone else? All right. Then council's community and event updates are next. Does any member of council have an update this evening? No, seeing none. Okay, we'll move on. Council's consideration of the consent agenda is next. Oh, wait, I have an update. I was appointed to the State Board of Health by the governor. So I'll be proudly serving the CD7 district starting next month, even though we're not technically in CD7 yet, but we will be. So stay tuned for more exciting updates from the Board of Health. Now, council's consideration of the consent agenda is next. The clerk will read all of the consent agenda items by title, and there'll be one opportunity for public comments and council questions and comments. Will the clerk please read agenda items 7A through 7D by title?
7A, approval of minutes from September 13th, 2022, regular meeting. 7B, resolution number 2022-127, approving the 2022 amendment to employment agreement between the city and county of Broomfield and the city and county manager. 7C, ordinance number 2022-02, amending Broomfield Municipal Code Section 2-04-030 and adding chapter 2-45 to establish a resident member county board of health, first reading. 7D, resolution number 2022-106, establishing a charter review committee.
Thank you. We'll now proceed with in-person public comment. If there's anyone who would like to be heard on any of those items, please come to the podium, state your name and neighborhood for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. And I don't see anyone online, so we'll move on to council member questions. Any council members have questions on the consent agenda? Councilmember Shah.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is on item 7A, which is the minutes. which, is going to sound a little weird, but I miss my opportunity to thank staff for your work on Broomfield Days. Thank you for all of the staff that were involved that day. Thank you to the community that turned out. It was a great day. I missed my opportunity during council comment to thank you all for your hard work that day. So just wanted to take this opportunity to do that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember. Ditto. Anyone else? All right, then we'll now proceed with council's approval of the consent agenda. Is there a motion by council that the recommendations contained in the staff reports for agenda items 7A through 7D be approved? Councilmember Leslie.
I recommend that the consent agenda be approved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Henkel.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All right, all in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. We have one item for the Board of Social Services this evening, proposed resolution, and I won't forget to take the vote on it. Resolution number 2022-124-BSS, acknowledging review of expenditures and electronic benefit transfers for the period of January 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2022. The meeting of the Board of Social Services is called to order. I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Anderson. Here. Cohen.
Here.
Hinkle.
Here.
Jezerski.
Here.
Leslie.
Here.
Lim.
Here.
Linstead.
Here.
Marsh Holston.
Here.
Schaff.
Here.
Ward.
Here.
Thank you. Quorum is present. Board members have a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, council and community. Director of Human Services, Dan Casey. I was just, Dan ran into the office today. And so as I'm looking at him here, he has caught his breath. But it did lighten the load for the evening right before the council meeting. With that, Mr. Casey.
Thank you, Manager Hoffman. And thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Co-Chair, and members of the board. I'm Dan Casey, the Director of Human Services. And as I do each quarter, I will briefly highlight our EBT expenditures for your acknowledgement. Wanted to highlight just a couple of things. One is we do this quarterly, and EBT payments are made by the Colorado Department of Human Services directly to program recipients who reside in the city and county of Broomfield and are accounted for as part of Broomfield's overall human services expenditures. And just some quick highlights, our Colorado Works program, which is also referred to as TANF, Temporary Aid for Needy Families. We saw an increase of about 13% over the same time period from last year. SNAP was up about 6% from that same time period, and then Medicaid was up about 13%. Again, we've talked in this meeting previously about our seeing all of our programs increase, and during the pandemic, a lot of fluctuation depending on the funding and the federal funding and the ARPA funding and the coronavirus relief funding. But consistently over the last couple of years, we've seen an increase in most all of our programs. Wanted to jump back down to the last bullet on the memo is CCAP, our Child Care Assistance Program. That program has seen a slight increase in the amount of dollars paid, or the amount of money that is being expended in CCAP, although we haven't seen a large increase in the number of participants in CCAP. I think we equate that to a lot more remote work and people working from home and doing their own childcare, and also just the cost of childcare is sometimes a burden for families. Overall, across all of our human services programs, we're up about 11% in total households. And we do our numbers a little bit differently sometimes. We have our total households, our unduplicated counts, our number of individuals, but overall across all of our programs, we are up about 11.5%. And just to kind of put a cap on that, we served about 7,605 unduplicated households and throughout the last year. So again, we talk often also about our fiscal years. We are in the second quarter of our Broomfield fiscal year. This memo closes out the fourth quarter of the state fiscal year, and it recaps the third quarter of the federal fiscal year. So again, we're always playing that money moving game with how fiscal years end. I did want to highlight two other quick things. We talk about the federal change in how we do child welfare or the Family First Prevention Services Act. And I think last quarter we had a question about how many kids are we serving in out-of-home placement. Right now, we have only 10 kids in out-of-home placement. I'm very happy to report that's kind of our goal, is to reduce those number of kids in out-of-home placements. Of those kids in out-of-home placement, they're all, I'm sorry, not all. A number of them are in our foster care system or kinship care. And then there was also a question, I think, last quarter about how many foster homes do we have and how many foster kids do we have? So right now we've got 12 certified foster homes and 10 total kids in out-of-home placement. So we actually have more foster homes than we have kids in out-of-home placement right now. Again, that's something that's good for us. We want to keep kids in out of home. We want to keep kids out of home placement, keep them with their families or with their kin. So that's a pretty interesting number for us. And 10 kids in out of home placement is pretty remarkable. It shows the dedication and work for our child welfare team to really get into those families, work with the families, and keep those kids at home. And don't remember what my last point was, so that concludes my presentation.
Probably wasn't that critical.
Oh, I do recall, Madam Chair. Just again, an update on LEAP. You guys had asked me to come back with our LEAP updates. So LEAP is our low income energy assistance program, and we had moved the administration of that program to Goodwill Industries. And in the reporting period that you'll see in the memo before you, we are down about 6% in our households served, but we are up quite a bit in the dollars that have been administered. And there was also an arrears program where we were paying utility arrearages, and that was the main contributor to the increase in dollars. And that really does conclude my presentation.
Thank you so much, Mr. Casey. We'll now proceed with in-person public comment. If there's anyone who'd like to be heard on this item, please come to the podium and state your name and neighborhood for the record. I don't see anyone online. So questions from the board are next. Are there any questions? Councilmember Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. So just today, we got an email from our safety net nonprofits here in Broomfield, and maybe you were copied on this as well, from FISH, Oppressed Child, the Refuge, Community Food Share. And they talked about how, just there's a high concern for the ability to meet the needs of low-income residents, particularly around housing. The numbers are back to pandemic level, but without all the pandemic relief funds to help offset costs. So, this report that you provided tonight is basically, 6 months or so, in the rear. And so we're looking, at 2023 and seeing, pandemic support dollars, being minimized. We're seeing a higher need in the community, that there will be, kind of a perfect storm, to say the least, of what will be created in terms of the kind of overwhelming need that is going to exist. We will have, the Broomfield statistics are going to match kind of what is happening within the rest of Colorado. And those Colorado statistics are going to match what's going on around nationwide. So I know that you don't have a crystal ball, but kind of what does that support look like for our nonprofit community, for our residents, and especially our low income residents as we head into this next year?
Yeah, that is very insightful, Board Member Schaaf. I think that we have those conversations continuously across the state with my peers at the human services level, also with our healthcare policy and finance and other state partners. I think we all understand that this is going to be difficult. We were all kind of relying, I guess, on a lot of the ARPA funding and the Corona relief funding. And we know that that's not in perpetuity. Those dollars end. In fact, we talk about our public health emergency ending probably in the beginning part of 2023. And that takes away some of those additional benefits that folks have been receiving. I don't have a crystal ball. It does worry us. It's kind of the things that keep us up at night. I know that we are seeing an increase in our households that are using our services. We just need to get the word out. I know that rental assistance and the Department of Local Affairs and some of their programs, those dollars also have all been expended. So we're trying to figure out how do we, what avenues do we use to help with those programs? We talk a lot about prevention. That's one of the goals that we have, a strategic priority of our work in human services. And really that ounce of prevention is worth the pound of cure. If we can figure out a way to keep folks housed, to keep food on tables, to keep employment up to par, right? Through our run program and our workforce team. That's the best options that I could talk to you about right now. Again, it's things that we work on at the state level all the time, and actually at the federal level too. Again, you're absolutely correct. Those dollars will dry up and the need will still be there. It takes a village, right? We work with our nonprofit agencies year long, trying to help support them in any way we can. Referrals, shared clients, get folks on benefits, SNAP benefits, food assistance benefits, Medicaid, TANF. If folks are eligible, they should be on those programs. Another population that we do get worried about is our seniors, because a lot of our seniors that went on benefits over the pandemic. They're seeing now that max allotment that will change when the public health emergency ends, and that all they've known is max allotment, and that amount of money will go down. So again, we're trying to forecast and figure out what we can do, but right now it's a little intimidating to think about where we're going to go from here.
Well, I think you mentioned one word, which was prevention. And I think that in this sphere is a big deal. And what are the ways in which we can prevent we already see that this is coming. We see that, the statistics are showing that we're moving in this area. So what are some of those preventative measures that we can take? And you don't have to answer tonight, but what are some of those preventative measures that we can take to ensure that there isn't some type of, cliff that we hit come 2023, in terms of, we know some of these, residents that are going to be in need, and can we prevent them from really hitting a decline?
Yeah, and I can, next quarter, when I come back, we can talk about maybe some of the initiatives from the state level. And I can work with my team and maybe bring back some information on a more definitive programs that we're going to do that are more prevention related.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Henkel.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry, I have like drink cups up here and computers and all that fun stuff. Thank you, Mr. Casey, for your presentation, and in good communication. You have no small task ahead of you, especially coming out of this pandemic. I just had a few questions. The thing that did give me heartburn was the ARPA money not going to be in LEAP, too much longer, right? So I do have concerns about that. I'm wondering if we could even do a roundtable with some of our nonprofits and sort of brainstorm what we can really make happen, because we're not only our elderly are going to be in need of housing or whatnot, but we have a lot of families that have been out of jobs during the pandemic and those sorts of things, with the unemployment stopping and those sorts of things. So I did have just a request in the future, and I don't know if this matters or pushback is fine, but I'm just curious as to, in the future, I'm wondering if we could, as Broomfield grows, just as feedback on our charts here, I know that we're pointing out how many households we're serving, and every year we serve more and more, but I also would like to see that in correlation to population growth. So as a math person, as our population grows, of course, we're going to serve more people, but alongside with that proportion of Broomfield residents, who are we serving and how many? I did like in your budget presentation, I'm going to mention that just a little bit. I love the access that we're providing, the telehealth and the tele-eligibility. That's really crucial during these times, for sure. Let's see. I had a bunch of questions. Can you explain the Families First Coronavirus Response Act? I understand it started during the pandemic, but do we have any predictions on what's going to happen in the future and how it'll affect our Medicaid workload?
Yeah, so the, hold on one second. Yeah, so the Medicaid rules during the pandemic, because of the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, everybody that was on Medicaid at the time was locked in, and anybody that was eligible during the pandemic was locked in. So we've got more individuals on our Medicaid benefits right now than we have had ever. And what will happen is once that public health emergency ends and that act is no longer in place, we will have to do a redetermination on everyone that has Medicaid benefits and determine if they are still eligible or not. A lot of folks are categorically eligible. They'll remain on Medicaid, so they should not worry. It's all based on income and household composition. There's requirements, but a number of the individuals on that list have gained employment or gained insurance in another way through an employer, through private pay insurance. So those folks would then no longer be eligible for Medicaid. The federal government has promised us about a 60-day notice at the state level. So we should be able to communicate ahead of time. It's not going to be tomorrow, it's shut off. Folks will know ahead of time that the public health emergency is ending and a date certain. And once we have that date certain, we will communicate it to our clients as well. So right now we're working ahead as best we can to determine how many of our folks on our locked in report may no longer be eligible. And if we can determine that, we can reach out to them even earlier and say, hey, when this ends, you're no longer going to be eligible based on your new income level or your household composition. Again, it's a lot of work. It's going to create some additional labor on our end. So we do have access to some additional funds through HICPUF to help with some overtime costs and those type of things, but it will be a heavy lift.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I just want to make sure families are notified in advance of that. One more question. I do have a few more, but I think I might email those. One statement before I forget. A lot of people ask about CCAP funding and for schools, for kids, just so that people know that if in order to qualify for that CCAP funding, people have to either be working or taking a class, just to let people know that. And then one more question on the Senate Bill 22-235 to hire an outside entity to evaluate the costs to fund the administration of public assistance for 2025 to 2026. Will we have access to that funding model? And do we have any ideas to what indicators would be factored in? Is there any kind of talk about that?
Yeah, so that's going to be a state-run third-party evaluator for how we do our county administration allocations. I don't know that that formula has been determined yet. I think that's still in play. Yes, they are very transparent about what the formula is and what factors go into that formula. So we have been overspent on our county admin ever since I've been in this role. We're hoping that that does get adjusted. We do also, just broader swath, right? We do have mitigation at the end of the year. So any other counties that may be underspent in their county admin, those dollars go back into a pool and then are reallocated. Typically, most of our overspend in county admin has been covered. At least up to about 50-60% of it has been covered. So to your point, yes, we need them to look at the allocation. We would like to get additional funding for our county admin. Once I learn what that formula is going to be, it's not top secret. There's no trademark on it. So I would be able to share that with you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council member questions? All right, next is the board's consideration of proposed resolution number 2022-124-BSS. Will the clerk please read proposed resolution number 2022-124-BSS by title?
8.8, resolution number 2022-124-BSS, acknowledging review of expenditures and electronic benefit transfers for the period January 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2022.
Is there a motion? Councilmember Ward.
I move to approve resolution number 2022-124-BSS.
Will that work? Yes, it's to be adopted. Okay, is there a second, Councilmember Henkel?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? All right, all in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thanks again for the update, Mr. Casey, and all the work you do. There is no business before the Board of Health this evening. But we did approve moving forward with our own independent Board of Health. So I know we're all excited about that. Thank you for all the work you've done in the background. If you don't mind me just extemporaneously. Thanking you. Thank you. The first item under council business this evening is a public hearing and council's consideration on second and final reading of proposed ordinance number 2184, ratifying certain cooperation agreements and reimbursement agreements previously approved by the city council. I'll now declare the public hearing open. We'll follow the city's standard public hearing procedures for code changes. First, staff will present a summary of the ordinance. Next, we'll ask for public comments. Finally, questions from city council members. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor. And Carl Front, our senior attorney, who's usually behind the scenes, joins us tonight to walk us through this item. Mr. Front.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, Council, Carl Front, senior attorney. Hopefully this one will be pretty brief. So if I could get the next slide. Chapter 340 of the Municipal Code authorizes city council to enter into sales and use tax reimbursement agreements for property containing retail or commercial businesses. These reimbursement agreements may constitute multiple fiscal year direct or indirect financial obligations of the city within the meaning of the city's charter. Next slide. Chapter 340.020 parenthetical D of the Municipal Code says that the reimbursement agreement shall be approved by either ordinance or resolution. However, section 6.4 of the city charter requires those agreements to be approved by ordinance. Next slide. Over the years, various cooperation and reimbursement agreements approved by the city council have been approved by resolution, even though they should have been approved by ordinance under the charter. The proposed ordinance before you this evening will ratify any cooperation agreements or reimbursement agreements previously approved by the city council in order to comply with the charter. And that concludes the presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Front. We'll start with in-person public comment. If there's anyone who'd like to be heard on this item, please come to the podium. And I don't see any online. Next is questions from council. Members should limit themselves to questions during this portion. The time to introduce amendments and state positions for or against this item is later. Councilmember Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. So with this, resolution ordinance, what's the big deal? Can't we just interchange these two and just do this, do these by resolutions as opposed to ordinance? Why make the extra threshold to make them ordinances?
So this was brought to our attention by our current bond counsel, and it with regards to a bond issuance that one of the metropolitan districts was doing when the bond counsel was asked to issue an opinion. One of the questions they were asked is, was this reimbursement agreement properly approved? And when they looked at their city charter, they identified this issue for us. Charter controls over the municipal code. And so with their interpretation, that's why we're here tonight. And so that to ratify all these agreements and future agreements will be brought forward by ordinance.
Okay, but I mean, could even though it was against charter, could we just allow them to be resolutions, or is there a different threshold in terms of ordinances over resolutions?
That's a good question. I would say the difference is that is the first and the second reading and the opportunity for the public participation. It gives them two opportunities to come in and comment on it, and so. Given bond counsel's interpretation, ordinance will be what we'll be bringing forward to you in the future.
Okay, and then my last question is, because these are on our, we're working with our developers on this reimbursement agreement, is this set a kind of a longer time frame in which developments take to approve, or is this, not necessarily going to add much time to those development review process?
It potentially it could because of the requirement for 2 meetings before council. However, not in every instance is the development agreement brought forth with the land use plans. And so it could be on a separate track and not necessarily slow them down from their project. But if you look at it globally, yes, it could have some impact.
Okay, thank you for the answers. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other council members? All right, well, thank you, Mr. Front. A little housekeeping there. Public hearing is closed. Next is council's consideration of proposed ordinance number 2184. Will the clerk please read proposed ordinance number 2184 by title?
11A, public hearing ordinance number 2184, ratifying certain cooperation agreements and reimbursement agreements previously approved by the city council. Second and final reading.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Councilmember Ward?
I move that ordinance number 2184 be adopted on second reading.
And ordered published by title.
And order published by title.
Thank you, council members. Is there a second? Councilmember Marshall.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? All right, no amendments, then all in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item under council business this evening is a public hearing and council's consideration on second and final reading of proposed ordinance number 2198, amending chapter 17 of the Broomfield Municipal Code regarding the requirements for gas stations. I'll now declare the public hearing open. We'll follow the city's standard public hearing procedures as outlined earlier. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor. We are joined tonight as our regular host, Ms. Burton Zeddy. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Noted on the slide is that this is a first reading, but this is actually the second reading. Forgot to update that for you for this proposed ordinance. As you may recall, over the last 6 months, City Council has seen 2 new concept reviews for gas stations. There's also a third gas station that's currently proceeding through the development review process. In most areas of Broomfield, gas stations require uses by special review. And one of the key considerations at the concept reviews has been that the applicant needs to demonstrate a need and desire for a gas station as part of their use by special review application. Concerns have arisen regarding proximity of proposed gas stations to other existing gas stations during those concepts. If gas stations are too close together, they provide nearly similar services, and then the consumer demand in that area will need to be split between the 2 gas stations, or in some instances, multiple gas stations, with the new and the existing facilities that that market already has. This ordinance this evening is brought forward by staff as an option for providing a clearer direction to potential gas station developers. Next slide, please. As written, this ordinance would state that new gas stations would need to be located no closer than 1,000 feet from an existing facility. Staff included an allowance for 2 gas stations to be located at an intersection, even if within that 1,000-foot separation. This was included as an option within the ordinance, since sometimes multiple gas stations located at an intersection to serve different directions of traffic. As part of the ordinance, it will also separate the term gas station and service station, as these are currently used interchangeably throughout the code. And although Broomfield has not been approached for a standalone electric vehicle charging facility, staff is also using the ordinance to clarify that just for the purpose of zoning, an electric vehicle charging station as a primary use of a property would be handled the same way as a gas station. This helps to address this potential future use within the code, zoning districts, as well as within PUD plans. As staff drafted this ordinance, we also considered including a requirement for gas stations to have a level 3 charging facility, which is a fast charger. We brought this ordinance with that potential language to ACES, the Advisory Committee for Environmental Sustainability, last August. They discussed that potential, but ultimately directed staff that they thought it would be better to bring back a separate ordinance for consideration of level 3 chargers. And there wasn't really a consensus that gas stations were the appropriate use to start with for fast chargers. So that portion of the ordinance was not included. An administrative amendment to the ordinance this evening was included to remove a section within the ordinance. It was the fourth whereas statement that referenced still the level 3 charger requirements. So that was a correction staff made with the ordinance. Next slide, please. So this is a map of some of the existing gas stations within Broomfield. This is definitely not an official map of all gas stations, but we put this together to help to guide our discussion this evening on the distribution of gas stations within Broomfield. If in the future, a property owner or developer were to inquire regarding a potential gas station, and if this ordinance were to be passed this evening, planning staff would then research the land uses within 1,000 feet to make sure whether or not there is a gas station so that they can advise that potential developer. This map would not be the sole source of that information. As mentioned, one of the use by special review criteria is there a desire for this use in this location? So is it desirable to have a gas station in a particular location? And this ordinance is intended to potentially provide some guidance in that regard. In an area, if an area already has a gas station within 1,000 feet of it, then this ordinance would be stating that no, there is not a desire for a second gas station on that particular property. The ordinance does not provide a different path for gas station review and consideration, and for locations that require use by special review, the applicant would still have to address the desirability and need for a gas station through the public hearing process. However, it is the intent with this ordinance to help provide some additional guidance as early as possible within the development review process. And that concludes staff's presentation this evening.
Thank you very much, Ms. Burton-Zetti. So we'll take public comment on this now, starting with in-person comment. If anyone would like to be heard, please come up to the podium. I'm not seeing any. Questions from council are next. Members should limit themselves to questions during this portion. The time to introduce amendments and state positions for or against this item is later. We'll go to Councilmember Leslie.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just curious, when I saw the map, it doesn't appear that grocery stores that have gas stations are included on that map. So I'm just curious, how are they considered in the scope of this resolution?
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Leslie. I'm not sure if we missed particularly a gas station, definitely, like I said, not an official use, but it should be included. There are gas stations at a few of our King Supers, and those would definitely be looked at as an existing facility, even though they're co-located with a gas station. As long as they're a retail gas station facility, we would include them in the separation.
Thank you, Councilmember Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor. Since the first reading, I've had some issues with this proposal, so help me understand a few things. I've had trouble with the rationale. And it seemed that the idea that if someone moves in with a new station, that they're just going to split existing demand rather than they're moving in response to increased demand. So I'm having difficulty with the rationale that we shouldn't have stations move into the same location because we wouldn't see an increased sales. Or we wouldn't have fuel sales, so it's not in the interest to the city's bottom line.
So I think what our thought was, if there is an existing facility within a market and another facility is located and providing that same service within that existing market, that the sales would be split between those two facilities. So if there is an increased need, it would still go up for both facilities, but it would be split amongst the two. So it's not solely a financial consideration, but really one of the key driving factors for us bringing this forward was to help provide the direction that council had made comments about whether there was a desire or a need to have gas stations in close proximity. And this was intended to help provide that guidance of as we heard during prior concept reviews, would like additional separation between those uses that are so similar.
I guess the other side to that is when businesses move into each other, they create competition, and that improves possibly the quality of the businesses that are there. So, or also involving competition that might result in lower gas prices. So I'm just curious, the theory, it seems flawed to me that somehow we can foresee what would happen if we allow gas stations come in together.
And I'll let Mr. Romine add a little bit to that.
Mayor Pro Tem, council members, Councilmember Cohen. First off, to answer part of your earlier question, City and County of Broomfield does not receive any tax revenues from gas stations. That goes to the state of Colorado, which is distributed based upon a population formula. So we don't necessarily see a gain by adding more gas stations here from that fiscal side. Obviously, as you all can anticipate, there's soda pop, there's other items, snack cakes, candy, whatever, that are sold in those gas stations. We do receive that sales tax. So the real volume of a gas station, we don't really receive a direct benefit from the fiscal side. So going back to that part of the question.
From the gas sales.
From the gas
So
sales.
we do from all the others.
Yeah,
which
from the other
most of their
things.
sales are convenience store items, right?
Yeah, and relatively incidental when you look at the volumes. But secondly, and I think more pointed to your second question, and that is would it increased competition from two gas stations across the street or within a specific market cause some changes in the gas prices? Yes, we see that all the time, but at the same time, you'll notice as you drive through any of those congested areas where you see a number of gas stations, price variability will occur within that. And you will see that competition not occur necessarily location to location because most of them are not privately owned independent businesses, but the gas prices are being set at a different level. And so what you'll oftentimes see, it was mentioned earlier about King Soopers. I think it was Councilmember Leslie asking about King Soopers having gas stations when they're included. King Soopers gas price tends to be the same in multiple locations across parts of the metropolitan area, and it's not set necessarily by the individual purveyor at that point.
If you went up to Interstate Exit, forgetting what the number was, Frederick, where there were 4 stations, and they all dropped like 40 cents, and you couldn't get into them because there were too many cars lined up. My other question is just environmental, the concern. Is there a benefit to having gas stations closer together rather than spreading them out? And I raised that because, and I thought it was ironic because I asked this question earlier. We were proposing a buffer, 1,000 foot between stations, but we have no distant requirements between gas stations and homes and parks and schools. And there is concern cited about the vapors and all the other fumes that come off gas stations. So I'm just curious, what's the environmental formula here?
Councilmember Cohen, tonight's ordinance was really drafted up through the lens of providing guidance based on the concept review. And we didn't focus on the health and safety concerns of, or the impact of what could happen if there were multiple in one location versus spread out. That was not something that staff researched as part of this ordinance.
Thank you. And we keep referencing a concept review, and I know which everyone's referencing. And if there was a 500 foot buffer or 1,000 foot between homes, it wouldn't be an issue because that one particular station was very close to homes. So I'm having issues with this because I think it probably could use some more work. And I think the environmental factors should be considered. I think we're making a lot of projections economically that may or may not be true. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Lim.
Yes. Well, we're not discussing the environmental factors, but I guess there would be a question of the concentration of gas stations in one place too, that would impact those residents in the immediate vicinity. There is one gas station that's in the development process that you referred to. I looked this afternoon, it's listed on the website as still in concept review. Is that website updated with its current status?
Councilmember Lim, we've had a few go through concept. So I'm not sure which one was referenced, but there is one going through development review on State Highway 7 in the Highlands development on the north side. It is located more than 1,000 feet from the existing gas stations, both in Erie as well as our existing Murphy Express. And certainly if there needs to be an update to that Broomfield voice page, I'll work with staff to have that updated.
No, this is the come and go at 287 and Miramonte, that area.
That project did
It's
recently
still listed in
complete
concept review.
Right. That one recently completed its concept review online and the page remains active until a formal application is submitted. We don't have a formal application yet.
Okay. Okay. So would there, would there be any, would it be appropriate if we were to pass this ordinance? I know it doesn't apply because they're already in the process, but would it be appropriate to bring to the attention of the applicant that we did pass this ordinance this evening?
Councilmember Lim, technically that application is not in process. And so if city council were to pass the ordinance this evening, it would apply to projects that have not received approval yet. We do not have any projects that are going through the process officially submitted, even close to being considered, that would be brought before you before the effective date of the ordinance.
Good. Concept review doesn't count. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Marshallson.
Well, that actually was my question, whether or not the two come and goes that were in concept review, whether this applied to them. So I guess she answered that. So I appreciate that. One comment, just real quick. I do, whether or not we deal with it in this particular format, I do agree with the previous comments that we should look at the environmental impacts of gas stations and whether or not we need to have a residential setback from them. So for future. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council member questions? All right, next is the public hearing is closed. Next is council's consideration of proposed ordinance number 2198. Will the clerk please read proposed ordinance number 2198 by title?
11B, public hearing, ordinance number 2198, amending chapter 17 of the Broomfield Municipal Code regarding requirements for gas station requirements, second and final reading.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Councilmember Ward.
I move that ordinance number 2198 be adopted on second reading as directed by the city council and be published.
And is there a second? Councilmember Marshallson.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? All right, will the clerk please call the roll?
Anderson,
Yes.
Cohen,
No.
Why did I say that? Okay, we might as well continue.
Hinkle,
Yes.
Jazerski,
Yes.
Leslie,
Yes.
Lim,
Yes.
Linstead,
Yes.
Marshallson,
Yes.
Schaff,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Thank you, Claudia. That passes unanimously, and thank you, Ms. No, wait. Oh, you were no? I'm glad we did a roll call. That passes 9-1. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Burton-Zetti. Our final item under council business this evening is the monthly oil and gas update for September 2022. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We're whipping right along. And Mindy Oakler is joining us this evening.
Thank you, Manager Hoffman. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and City Council. This evening's oil and gas update will focus on Broomfield's air quality monitoring report for Q2. Before we dive into the AQM information, some important things to note to understand the Q2 report. So during Q2, oil and gas operations included coil tubing, production tubing, and production facility construction at United, flowback to production at both Northwest A and B, and drilling and hydraulic fracking at Interchange A and B as well. Of course, the date range for Q2 data is April 1st through June 30th of this year. The representative from Boulder Air is unavailable tonight to present their second quarter report. In anticipation of this absence, Boulder Air provided a recorded narrative with their presentation slides, which were provided in the staff memo. Questions and comments related to Boulder Air's quarterly report can be submitted using the link that was also provided in the staff memo. A representative from Ajax Analytics is here tonight and will share their quarterly report for Q2 and will be available after the presentation for questions. At this time, I'd like to introduce Ms. Morgan Frazier.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Morgan Frazier, data analyst with Ajax Analytics. Thank you, Mindy, and thank you, Council and Mayor, for taking the time to review Ajax's Q2 2022 program review. We're happy to share our results with you and also happy to answer any questions that you may have following the presentation. Next slide, please. Today, we'll begin with the summary findings from Q2 in comparison with previous quarters, and then we'll briefly touch on what we can expect and what we've already seen moving into Q3. Next slide, please. Ajax's monitoring network throughout Broomfield uses PID sensors, photoionization detectors, and triggered canister samples to characterize air contaminants and provide insight to emission sources. The Broomfield program combines targeted emissions near concern sites along with community level monitoring designed to identify hotspots and characterize Broomfield's air contaminants. These are the summary results of Q2 2022. Scattered across 12 monitoring sites, this quarter analyzed 10 canisters. There were 2 Plume Tracker deployments to aid in the spatialization and visualization of the gathering line leak identified early in the quarter. We had 125 Q2 weekly canister samples, which were added to our collective database regarding weekly canister concentrations throughout Broomfield, and our Q2 uptime was 95.6%. Next slide, please. Here we can see the weekly distributions throughout much of the program history of TVOC CSU 49, which is the 49 species compromised in our TVOC lab analysis. This distribution of concentrations across the network is represented by the line shown here, with red being the maximum, blue the average, and green the minimum concentrations. You can clearly see the drilling operations at the Livingston pad throughout much of the start of the program throughout early 2020. Influences from drilling operations at the Northwest Parkway, United, and Interchange pads are also seen in late 2021 up through today. Since the end of 2021 up through Q2 2022, there has been an overall gradual decrease in the weekly TVOC concentrations. Q2 saw a decrease from 15.6 parts per billion in Q1 down to 9.1 parts per billion in Q2. Slight increases in the maximum TVOC seen in early April and May coincide with coil tubing and hydraulic fracturing at the United and Interchange A pads. However, overall, the weekly TVOC concentrations have almost returned to the narrowing distributions that you see in between the 2 drilling operations throughout late 2020 and early 2021. The sharp decrease in the maximum TVOC concentrations seen in spring 2020 were representative of that drilling coil tubing operations switching to closed loop flowback at one single Livingston pad. And it's much different than what we're seeing now as we are drilling at 5 different pads over the same amount of time. Next slide, please. We've continued to see key metrics similar to TVOC, maintaining a similar minimum and average on most weeks. We've also continued to see a pattern where oil and gas focused sites show more individual weeks with outlier measurements, helping to signify that the strongest measurements are mainly localized to those oil and gas sites. Here we see the weekly benzene concentration throughout much of the program history, with red again being the maximum, blue the average, and green the minimum. Note the Q2 average is the lowest of all previous averages at 0.9 parts per billion. Prior to this quarter, we had seen the average range from 0.1 parts per billion to 0.25 parts per billion. Since the start of 2022, we can see a narrowing distribution between that minimum and maximum TVOC. The maximum concentration recorded has decreased again from Q1 at 0.36 to 0.28 parts per billion in Q2. The maximum is equal to the maximum observed before drilling began at Northwest Parkway 2 pads in Q3 of 2021. In context with the ATSDR chronic guideline, we're less than 1 year of exposure health guideline limit. Broomfield is still well below that limit and has not since near crossed it. Next slide, please. While Q1 saw 3 of the highest benzene concentrations in the history of the program, there's been a sharp decrease in the number of and signature of triggered canisters collected in Q2. Only 2 triggered canisters captured elevations in TVOC with maximum benzene and TVOC concentrations much lower than those seen previously. Ethane and methane concentrations were similar in the trigger canisters between Q1 and Q2, again with overall significant decreases from Q3 of 2021. Next slide, please. There were 2 plume trackers sent out in this quarter to help again aid in the spatial visualization of the gathering line leak detected early in the quarter. Spatial maps like this one shown here show the same methane data presented over different concentration scales in the color bar to help visualize the wide range of concentrations observed. And this may provide some insight into the movement and dispersion of the plume. This map and the next 2 spatial maps on the following slides were all taken on June 23rd. Notice the color scale of this map is 0 to 20 parts per million of methane. We'll see that concentration change on the next few slides. Next slide, please. On the same map, at a slightly higher methane concentration of 0 to 100 parts per million, we see a more localized and narrow distribution of higher methane concentrations in that localized area. Next slide, please. And again, on the same date, moving into higher concentrations of 0 to 600 parts per million of benzene or methane, sorry, we see more localized and narrow distribution of the higher methane concentrations, indicating that in that dashed circle, that is where the line was actually found to have issues. Next slide, please. The spatial map on the right was taken on July 1st, following the remediation of the leak, and is shown in comparison to the first June 23rd map. Throughout the same route, methane was measured between 1.94 parts per million and 2.57 parts per million, where on the June 23rd map, methane ranged from 2 parts per million to 828 parts per million. This significant reduction in methane and canister VOC concentrations suggests that the leak documented on June 23rd had been successfully remediated upon the 7-1 route. Next slide, please. Now just briefly touching upon the Q3 preview and expectations. Next slide, please. Looking into what we've expected and what we've already seen, we anticipated a quieter quarter with less triggered samples. We expected this to be a concentration or a combination of higher trigger thresholds, as well as operations moving into mainly closed loop flowback at many of the paths. We expect the 1-week monitoring results to look similar to post-Livingston operations, and we are continuously working towards more stable systems. And we've learned a lot about the mechanical operations of our monitoring stations throughout Q1 and Q2. We've gained a stronger understanding of symptoms as older systems reach the end of their useful life. And we've implemented new procedures for identifying and resolving many of the issues effectively and efficiently throughout Q2. We'll continue to implement these new procedures as we move forward into Q3 and beyond. Next slide, please. Our report has been published to the public dashboard along with all of our previous quarterly reports. You can access these at any time through the website. And next slide, please. And that concludes our presentation. We'll happily take any questions you may have. Thank you for your time, Council.
Thank you. Did Mindy, did you want to transition it over to Detlev's? We'll hear on both. What's the plan here?
We are not listening or watching Detlev's. It's linked in the presentation for any additional information and follow-up.
Yes, that's right. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right. Then, so we go right to council member questions
Correct.
or public comment first. We'll proceed with in-person first. If anybody has any questions about this item, please come to the podium and you have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Council. John Ewald, Pinnacle North Subdivision. Could more information be provided about the leak that was detected or found in June, I think it was? What operator was responsible for it? Were there any fines that were levied because of the leak? And did they provide any payment to the people who actually found the leak? Thank you.
Great questions, Mr. Ewald. Mindy, would you like to address it? I know I'm curious.
Thank you for your question. So a lot happened with that. We have put out public notices that talk about the findings for that. Our staff, in collaboration with other groups, the utility company, the operator.
Who was it?
That would be Extraction
Oh.
was the operator for that. Not current to any of the
pads that we've got now. It was a midstream issue. So it was the gathering lines under the ground and that kind of thing. So we do have a lot of information on that, and I can point you to what we've posted publicly. I can send you links to those. It might be easier to look at those than for me to try and summarize all of that information, if that would be okay.
I can summarize quickly. No, no one was fined. Come to find out that midstream is darn near completely unregulated. So you have the production spot and then you have the capture spot, and in between, it's similar to the Wild Wild West. So again, the anticipation is that as much as we'd like to be able to finger point or draw back, the likelihood of that happening is slim to none.
Well, that just gives me lots more questions now.
Midstream is
Underneath our land are a bunch of extraction pipelines. So are you saying that they're not regulated?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Seriously?
Yes, and not just extraction, but as a whole, the mapping capabilities that we have now have not been in practice. So it's through the discovery, generally not proactively, that these pipes are identified. So it's a postmortem that occurs. So again, when we reach out to COGCC and the other regulatory bodies, the feedback is I don't want to say one of many, but certainly one of the last almost completely unregulated, who's on first, what's on second with the midstreams.
Interesting.
Mhm.
So even the pipelines, I don't know, I'm jumping in front of y'all, but I don't do that a lot. These pipelines on our taxpayer funded open space that crisscross all over the north part of Broomfield. Is there any type of enforcement when they leak on our land?
Ms. Gilbert?
Yeah, let me just provide some clarification because we need to kind of focus on what we're talking about, because there's gathering lines and then there's the flow lines. Those flow lines, when it relates to extractions operations under the operator agreement, that's part of the operator agreement.
Okay.
So those are, they need to do all of the testing.
Okay.
There can't be leaks related to those. And those are the ones that you're focusing on through the open space. That's part of the operator agreement.
Okay. Thank you.
So no current operations.
Okay.
But the one that was identified was not part of the current operations.
Old one.
And yes, we have many going through Broomfield, through Weld County, through Fort Collins, all along that basin.
Yay.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thanks for allowing me that, y'all. Who wants to go first? Since I already did. Councilmember Staff? Oh, sorry. And then you. Go ahead, Councilmember Staff.
Thank you, Mayor. So I asked a question of staff regarding our registration under the Broomfield Municipal Code 1754-110 about the oil and gas operators being required to register. Just wanted to put that out for rest of council's information. So to date, we have received a registration packet and associated fee from Blue Chip Oil. Staff has confirmed with both Crestone Peak Resources and Extraction Oil and Gas, Civitas, I assume, that they have almost completed their registration packets and we anticipate receiving them shortly. The three operators that would require registration would be Blue Chip Oil, Crestone Peak Resources, Extraction Oil and Gas. Extraction Oil and Gas, just one active well, as the new development horizontal wells are covered by the operator agreement and therefore exempt from that requirement of the municipal code. So with that, jumping into kind of air monitoring and noise monitoring. So we know that, and thank you for the presentation. As you know, Q3 starts and we anticipate a quieter environment, we know that that operations are ramping down. And so I'm curious, what is the timeline for decisions regarding the air monitoring contracts near the Civitas wells?
Very good question. Thank you for your question. So what I can say about the air quality monitoring program, staff is actively reviewing Broomfield's current program and working with our AQM vendors and our data scientists in determining needs for the 2023 AQM program. We want to ensure adequate and appropriate air quality monitoring continues that best protects public health and welfare in 2023 and beyond. So we are currently looking at scope of work and that kind of thing for 2023.
Okay, thanks. And with us having two different contracts with Boulder Air as well as Ajax, how, with the specific nature of those two kind of contracts in place, one of them is much more total, the other one is much more site specific. How does that determine what type of equipment technology is going to be needed in the northern part of Broomfield?
Again, good question. I will say that we are looking at using the same equipment and technology. It's just a matter of scale because of where our well pads are right now in Broomfield.
I'm going to ask Danae to come up and fill in a little bit more with regards to redundancy.
Councilmember Schaaf, if hopefully I get to the spirit of your question. I think one thing we learned actually from that midstream leak is that it was a huge collaboration between Broomfield staff watching the data, Ajax and Boulder Air. So moving forward and maintaining the integrity of the program, it's really important that we have all three of those working in complementary or conjunction with each other. So the scale back that Mindy mentioned will still include we're recommending with both vendors so that we have that baseline and we have that coverage in the different capacities. And the scale back would really focus on the redundancies. So keeping locations at each well pad, so those 4 coverages, as well as a canister to maintain that baseline to go off of. That data is clearly important as well. And then with the Boulder Air, looking at doing one of the trailers. So right now we have 2 currently. So the North Pecos and then the Soaring Eagle up on that north end. But based on the land that they can cover, we're able to move that more strategically, still get the same coverage that we have right now, just removing some of that redundant positioning that you're seeing currently. Does that answer your question?
It does help.
Okay.
And I guess the reality is that these wells are moving into production phase, which is very similar to the wells that are, other wells in Broomfield and just outside of Broomfield. And we don't have that level of air monitoring that exists in those northern wells. There's a well just outside of the Ward 3 boundary that's in Boulder County. That well does not have any air monitoring anywhere near it. And we know based upon wind flows that at times that can be moving east into Broomfield. So there isn't that level of air monitoring that exists around any of these other wells. And so I guess I'm looking for, why we would continue to offer that very site-specific air monitoring when it really doesn't exist within any other parts of Broomfield.
Sure. And so we'll be bringing forward the proposed contracts or the recommended contracts in December. And actually we met with the team today. We're putting together maps. So scientifically looking at with our vendors, what makes the most sense. So when we say 4 near pad sites, location matters, right? To your point, where do those go? And we'll provide that map. So you'll be able to see the current state and then that future state of what we're proposing based off of coverage to capture as much air quality events as we can.
Okay. And then I guess this is much more of a operational question, but what are the inspections and operational oversight to ensure that these wells aren't leaking? So are we just going to continue to rely on the air monitoring, or is there going to continue to be inspections and operational kind of oversight, not just amongst these wells in the north, but throughout the rest of Broomfield?
Sure.
To ensure
This is
that
a
they
great
are
question. I hope our
leaking?
oil and gas team is listening because they work really hard daily. So right now we have inspections 7 days a week. We have an inspector that does weekend coverage. The only days I don't think we cover is truly Christmas Day and maybe Thanksgiving. Is that right? I think are the only 2 days out of the year. Otherwise they're out there and we plan on keeping that. So we will maintain staff. We've moved some around to prioritize the infrared testing and things like that, but they will be out every single day doing their inspections on all of the active pad sites. So those will continue even in the production phases. They are doing them at Livingston, for example, right now, and that will continue into 2023.
Okay, thank you. Turning to noise monitoring contracts, I'm wondering that with the timing of completion of the kind of going into production, that those noise monitoring contracts will cease to exist, and hopefully we aren't going to be paying for, time that we don't need. Is there a need for this in the future with any of these oil and gas facilities at this point that we foresee? Or is this something that we can allow to expire?
So based on the data that we saw, even when we were in fracking and the decibel readings that we were getting, the justification to keep it after, now that we're in production, is not there. So the contract actually expires at the end of this year, and we do not anticipate bringing that back for renewal. We do have some noise monitoring equipment in-house. So when we're doing inspections, if there was a complaint received through the dashboard, we still have the ability to go out and identify and track sources as needed, but it won't be the robust program that we needed when we were in the pre-production phases.
Okay, thank you. And thanks for answering my next question. So thank you so much. That's all I have, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have one quick question, one follow-up on the leak issue. Is that something that we locally have the authority to regulate, or is that something we would have to push our state elected officials to move on, I guess is the question.
I'll defer to Pat on this one.
My understanding on that particular one, it was a gathering line and it wouldn't be within, and this is tricky in an area that I don't have the most expertise in, but it's, you have PHMSA that takes over some of the regulation of this, and this particular gathering line was not within our regulatory ability.
So even though it's within the borders of Broomfield, we don't have any authority to regulate it?
Yeah, that's because PHMSA and their federal authority.
And do we know if the COGC or the state is planning on regulating it at all at the moment?
I think that's a stretch.
I have no knowledge that that's happening.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Oh, Councilmember Lim.
Yeah, just a few on the follow-up on the gathering line first. There was a statement at one time on the dashboard that we were going to request a midstream pipeline map from the PUC. Did we ever get that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Councilmember Lim, we're sorry we didn't get your answers to in advance of the meeting. We were working on that and I left my computer back there. But we have requested it. Those maps aren't available until they've completed the registration process, and that's through the PUC. And so we followed up with them actually on Monday and just asked what the status was. They have completed they're in the process of the review and the registration. Once that's done, they plan to send us that map. And then when we have it, we'll make it available.
Okay. And then the bigger picture is we just need, as Mayor Castriato was referring to, we just need a map of all the pipelines going through Broomfield.
And we are trying to track, right? As we come up, our team is actively tracking and we have our own internal databases. So we're doing our best with the data that we have that we can put together and compared to what we have from the state as well.
Okay. And my question, the other question I asked from staff's perspective is, this was a good confluence of, from my perspective, the North Pecos was close to the pipeline leak. We had the Boulder Air noticing there were spikes and asking why. And then we had, like you said, some collaboration from a lot of parties to pinpoint the source exactly. So whose response, that was fortunate, but whose responsibility is it really to, I think it's naive to think this, with the number of pipelines, this won't happen somewhere else in Broomfield. So how are we going to get the same results where we just happen to have the stars align and we figure out where the source is?
Yeah. I would argue that that's a great question. I would argue that it actually is a great example of the teamwork that we have with our vendors and then internally with Broomfield. Broomfield staff actually noticed the anomaly with
They
the
did?
data.
Okay, good.
So through tracking, noticed that we were seeing some weird things. It wasn't aligning with oil and gas operations that we were seeing in our daily inspections. And so actually that was what prompted reaching out to our vendors to say, hey, what is going on? We're seeing this, but we're not seeing oil and gas operations. And I'm going to use the wrong term. What's the signatures were related to oil and gas, right? And so it wasn't aligning to what we were seeing. So that's when we reached out to Boulder Air. The data analyst on Boulder Air's team is to a whole nother level than what we can offer on our staff, who was able to look at the data and create some pretty fancy charts to separate it out. And then we also partnered with Ajax, and it was a combination of all of that we were able to finally figure it out, send staff out with testing and locate exactly where it was. So based on the coverage that we actually have with our canisters, with the Boulder Air trailers, and with our staff monitoring data with our vendors, I actually think that if that were to happen, there's a high chance that we would catch it again. So I think it was actually a good time for us to look back and say that our process is working. We're actively monitoring, and then that good relationship with our vendors is critical to move forward and make sure that we are catching those things in the future as well, because there is a lot of unknowns. So as many variables as we can control, we are trying to control internally and with our partners.
Okay, good. This is, there is a statement in the summary of Ajax that said, we expect few triggered events as we shift to closed loop flowback. And now we're finished with Q3, actually, and we're looking at Q2, but we're finished with Q3, and we have had elevated benzene, and we have had benzene exceedances of 9 parts per billion over the health guideline. We've had several. We've had a very large one at the end of July from United. We had one just on September 5th. We had one on September 6th, and we just had a trigger at United last night. So how does, what is staff's reaction to, we expect few triggered events? I mean, we're in production. We're 3 months out from when United went into flowback, and we're getting triggers at United. Do we have any insight into why?
We discussed this at our staff meeting this morning as well, and please correct me if I'm misspeaking, but there are still sand cans being emptied at United, and we did research that immediately. It happened at 7:19, I think, last night, so it was outside of our rounds, which happened between 7 and 5 p.m. And our inspector today was immediately on it this morning and was able to, there was no health concerns. We did issue a trigger report, but it was tied to the sand cans as the belief. There was no lingering. It was a short term. So we did inspect it right away and make sure. But that was the staff conclusion, was associated probably with the sand cans, which are being drained every 6 hours or emptied.
And there's a pattern. There's most of these triggers in the last 2 months have happened between 7 p.m. and 8 p.m. I don't know if you have any insight into what the operations are, but that's a pattern.
No, that's a good note. And we'll bring that up at our next staff meeting. They do have 24/7 staff at the United pad currently, the operator as well. So we're working in conjunction with them to see what's going on, but I'll take that back to the team as well and see, maybe we can shift temporarily and see what that looks like.
This is for Ajax. It says in their report that they are executing new procedures for proactively identifying and resolving issues. Could Ajax give us any idea what those procedures are going to be? Because we've had Northwest, we've had a sensor stuck at the same reading level for 3 weeks in August, and it stayed like that. And it didn't get replaced for 3 weeks.
Absolutely, Councilmember Lim. What we were trying to do and understand throughout Q1 was, again, those humidity sensors, which we were seeing on a lot of issues. And we worked very hard to understand those and didn't want to turn off the system without knowing what was actually going on. So that goes back to understanding if this was an actual rise in humidity or was it an actual elevation in TVOC. So we always erred on the side of caution, making sure that we weren't not triggering a canister in the event of an elevated TVOC. We needed to collect enough data and have enough confidence to say whether a PID signal is responding to humidity or not. In that case, this was early Q2 that we were still building that data set. Right now, we are able to look at the PID signal and understand, okay, this is most likely responding to humidity, get out there the next day and replace the system. That's our strategy right now. We understand it well enough that we can get that new system out there without having to wait and have that turnaround time. So that's kind of how we have gone about that.
Well, that's helpful because especially as we go to a system that doesn't have redundancy, I mean, we would like to know that there's at least one of them is working near the pad.
Absolutely.
Okay. Do we have, has Extraction indicated anything about returning to do separator maintenance?
That's a good question. I'm trying to think if we have a notice of that coming up anytime soon. They just completed some of that. And I don't know of the next date, and they haven't shared with us their next anticipated date for that. As far as staff knows, there's no date.
Okay. Do we, the COGCC has a rule that every 3 years they have to do separator maintenance. Will we be doing proactive? I mean, that's coming up in June of next year. If Extraction has not done the separator maintenance, will we be proactively telling them, or will we be waiting and having the COGCC step in and blah, 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 blah?
We always try to be proactive. It normally helps all of us. So that will be the goal. I do want to mention, in addition to the daily inspections, we do quarterly with the operators, and those are far more in-depth than the daily checks. And that's where we do a lot of those check-ins when they have something that's due at 1 year, 3 years, such as the example that you gave. So moving into that, when the inspectors are meeting for those big quarterly, that's where we talk about reclamation, things like that. We'll make sure that that's on the list so that we're backing into that next deadline to stay ahead of it.
Okay, good, thanks. And I did note recently that there were, in the oil and gas updates, there were quite a few notes about the inspections of the pads from that, where there were minor things that had to be addressed, as there were overgrown weeds or there was debris or something like that. So I do appreciate that the inspectors are keeping on top of those, and because that we want to avoid those problems on those legacy wells. So those are my questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. And I have just a few additional questions here on the public health study, and I don't see Dr. Weisner here. So, oh, wait. Dr. Belling is here. Okay. Could you, in more like layman's terms, explain the next phase of the public health study? Because there was about like a compilation of 20 words I didn't understand.
Good evening, Council. Jason Balling, Director of Public Health, and I'll do my best with Dr. Weisner out on maternity leave. We're currently negotiating with Dr. McKenzie on what the next phase of the study will look like. What we're discussing right now is looking at all payers claims database when it comes to specific health records. So looking at true medical diagnosis and going back to our air monitoring and other data that we have available, and correlating that data to actual health records, which will be the next step above and beyond just health or self-reported data that we got in this previous study. So the previous study informed us where we need to drill deeper, and we're going to use that information to design this next health study, if that helps.
Okay, yes, that is helpful. And my apologies, I forgot that Dr. Weisner is on a maternity leave. That would explain why she's not here. But yeah, that does help. Okay, so actually glad we're looking into that next level there. And on the air quality monitoring, I just want to, as we're moving into this next phase, I just want to take this moment to, I think we up here, we all, recognize this, but it's important for like the community also to recognize and appreciate just how much that data has been used at the state level. And it's going to be continued to be used as some of these other studies go forward. So that has been incredibly valuable, and I just appreciate everything that staff has done to keep that data out there being used. Councilman Lynn brought up the separator maintenance, but I think this is the one piece I think we have to recognize also as we go into this next phase. And I understand your question, Councilman Schaff, about like, we're just looking at these 4 pads, there's other areas, but the one thing that we've realized through every step of this development process is there's always something new that we discover. And we really don't know what maintenance looks like on 18 well pads. So I think there's that benefit to, I personally think there's that benefit to keeping that air quality monitoring going until we really see what maintenance looks like. There's more than separated maintenance, I'm sure that we're going to be capturing spikes from. So that'll be good to continue to monitor those sites. And if we could get some monitoring on some of the other sites, understand that low producing wells sometimes actually produce more emissions than some of the newer wells. So maybe there's some ability to monitor some of the other wells as well. I'd be open to that. And then this is the one I didn't get a chance to look into, that Regulation 7 reporting. And I don't know if staff had a chance to look at that, if there are any reports yet. Has Extraction or Civitas in any of the reporting captured any of the emissions that we have captured on their fence line monitoring? Or is it too soon to tell?
Too soon to tell is the quick answer on that, but we will report it out as soon as we have that information.
Yeah, that feedback to the state will be, I think, is incredibly helpful too, as some of this fence line monitoring is honed in, and really need to make sure that is truly capturing the same things that the community scale monitoring is capturing, or our third-party monitoring is capturing. All right, thank you. And then on the soil gas testing, I was trying to look back to see, I think there was a map, but I couldn't find it on the, I really want, we do want to find all the wells in northern Broomfield, but there are some of those that exist like Wildgrass and the Anthem area, in Baseline, and up in Palisade. Do we have the approvals in these wells are coming up in September and October that we're going to be going out to locate? Do we have the approvals for all those more critical locations?
Where you're going with that question. Do you have that information right here? We have that. I just don't have it available, and I don't want to misspeak. So we'll follow up, and we can include all of council on that so they're aware as well.
Yeah, that would be good to know. Would be that level of comfort when we've located all those critical wells, and then as we develop that far northern section, then we have more time to actually locate those. Well, I guess it'd be easier to get permission now too, because it's okay. So there's a benefit to just looking all of them, but I appreciate that. And then one last question on there's a significant berm work going on around the United pad, maybe the Northwest pads as well. Is that? Do we know the final scope of what they're doing there? Are they planting that with grass, or what they're planning to do as they build that berm up?
We have the plans that we could share out, and we do get an update daily. But again, it's supposed to look similar to kind of what the Livingston pad, where it's built up with the native grasses and part of that reclamation work. But let me get the actual so that you can see what they actually submitted, and we can share that out as well.
Okay, thank you. And that is all.
Sorry, just to clarify, were you specifically looking for the work happening at Northwest A and B? Because they're also doing reclamation work at United.
Yeah, United is where I'm seeing a lot of work being done.
That's where all the trucks are right now. Yeah.
Curious how that
Okay.
is going. Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Any other council member questions? Councilmember Schaaf?
Thank you, Mayor. Just one quick question. So in the past, we've gotten information regarding oil and gas revenues and expenditures. And I wondered if we could get an updated version of that to find out what revenues have been received to date, what expenditures have been made regarding oil and gas to date, and then kind of projecting, especially into 2023, as we're kind of in the budget season, what kind of revenues we anticipate to receive in 2023 and beyond, to kind of give us an idea of how much of a cliff we are on at this point in terms of revenues coming in.
Councilmember Schaaf, we'll send this see thing anymore without my readers. We just did this exercise, actually. So the 21 actuals, 22 projected and 23 projected, and the expenditures. We did not include, Danae, connect me if I'm wrong, we did not include staffing in these, in the revenue and expenditures. Is that correct?
Trying to read this email really fast that we sent. I believe that's correct.
Yeah,
If it's okay, we can,
have staff in there.
yes, yeah.
Give us some, we'll send this out now with the caveat that it's really, it's the contracts that's included in there and not the staffing.
Great. Yeah, no, I didn't anticipate that you'd have an answer that quick, but thank you for pulling that up.
You bet.
But just at some point, I would like to see that kind of refresh and see where we are. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council member questions? All right, well, it's 8:04. I know we're almost to the end, but I think we could do a quick bio break. So let's take our 10-minute recess and we'll reconvene at 8:14. Thank you. Well, I forgot to thank our oil and gas team for the presentation and our representatives too as well. Pass that along. Thank you all so much for the update. The city and county attorney's report is next. Ms. Rogers, do you have a report? No. Thank you, Ms. Rogers. The city and county manager's report is next. Ms. Hoffman, do you have a report?
I do not, only because Chief Himpleman, we have now put our PD updates under the special report. So I do not. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. So next is our final item of business this evening, an update from the Broomfield Police Department regarding public safety.
Good evening, everyone. Anaya Hempelman, Chief of Police. I'm at that in between glasses stage 2. I don't know if I need them on or off. I'll try without first. So I want to give a little bit of an update since I was here last. So I'm going to kind of jump from one to another, but maybe at the end, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Next slide, please. So I put up a crime and I really wanted to focus on burglary and theft. Those were the two that we saw elevated when I was here last. So I put those up so you know, we have seen a decrease in motor vehicle thefts from 32 to 27 in July, between July and August. And then burglaries, we had 16 in July and only 7 in August. Everyone always asks what happened that made those go down. I don't have that magic wand, but I do know we have done a number of special enforcement plans. I love when our officers work these because one of our officers works the night shift and I know she's been involved with some of these plans. So I do want to share in some of the special enforcement plans we've done such great work. And I'll talk a little bit more on the next slide, but in one case, officers recovered 116 grams of methamphetamine, a number of different drugs, along with different weapons. And I think anytime we set up these special enforcement plans and we're able to prevent crime in that sense that we are present, then it speaks volumes. And that's why I bring that up. One of the council members asked me previously what the ratio was for the percent per 1,000 of crime. I do have that number this evening. And I really focused on the violent crime rate because that is the number that really we focus on nationally and even here in Broomfield, obviously. And right now, and when I talk about the violent crime rate, it's specific to murder, sexual assault, robbery, and aggravated assault. And for 2022, we had 1.16 per 1,000 residents. And I just want to give a quick number that kind of gives you a little bit of how to compare us to others, because I know everyone always asks, what about everyone else? So I pulled some basic numbers. And like I said, we're at 1.16 per 1,000. For some of our neighbors, Thornton is 1.92, Northland is 4.06 per 1,000, and Westminster is 2.18, just to kind of give you just a feel for where we're at with that. Next slide, please. So some of the proactive policing and a little bit of a training update that we've done in the last couple of months. The catalytic converter is a really big deal. The thefts that we've been having are quite up more than ever in several years. And we are hosting a catalytic converter anti-theft event, which is really exciting for us to be hosting that October 3rd and 4th. I mentioned it previously that CatPaw did all kinds of programs. So we partnered with them and they're going to come out on those 2 dates. We're going to set up here in the parking lot and they're going to provide us with 150 anti-theft ETCH programs that they can help everyone who signed up come in and they'll assist them in getting the ETCH program as well as the kits so that they will be tracked and monitored. So if a catalytic converter gets stolen, now we at least know where to go back to see where it was taken from, because it will have some kind of marking that will identify who it belongs to.
Chief, what is CatPaw?
CatPaw is the Colorado Auto Theft Prevention Authority. Thank you. And they are really the ones that lead for the state for any kind of auto theft programs. And so that's why we're partnering with them. Also, I talked a little bit about the special enforcement plans. I talked about the suspects and some of the things that we've done. We've also recovered stolen cars. when we do these special enforcement plans, we have to be very strategic about how we do them because of the dangers involved for the officers, because they do wear plain clothes and they really try to target the areas that we have crime in so that they can be very specific to why we're there. And so when we do recover stolen cars or guns or drugs or any of those things, and we're able to actually apprehend the suspects, it's always better for us instead of just recovering a stolen car that's just parked in the middle of a parking lot with no suspect leads. So that's the plus of doing the special enforcement plan, is that we can really link it back to who the suspects are. Today, the police department, actually, while I was sitting back here between 4 and 6, we actually went out to Camden, Flatiron Apartments. They have unfortunately been hit with some crime areas with motor vehicle thefts. And so we went for 2 hours just on foot. All the officers walked around and they just left little notes on their cars. If they saw purses, cars unlocked, keys, we do see keys in the ignition, trying to at least be proactive of reminding everyone to lock your stuff up. Don't leave your stuff in the car. We do the routine at 9. We left those flyers at the doors as well, reminding people the routine of locking your doors and checking to make sure everything is closed at 9 o'clock. And I always include our B Corps mental health co-responder program. This program is amazing, but I'll share this because our mental health, we talk about this in everything that we do now, even for our officers. But to compare, we had 82 calls in January, 64 in February, and then we've seen this big increase of 134 calls just last month. So that really puts it into perspective of how much this program is being utilized and its success for the community as well as the officers who have to respond on these calls.
Chief, can you remind us what B Corps is?
Broomfield Co-Responder Program. It's our mental health partner program.
And who makes up that team?
That team is made up of our, are you talking about the chart program or specific to B Corps?
B Corps.
B Corps is very specific to our commander who oversees it, Commander Wiederquist. I think everyone has met him before. And then we have our mental health partners. And then we have officers who also are trained to assist in the team makeup. The next thing I brought up there is our peer support team. We sent them to a training. So I guess I should probably mention a little bit about peer support. I'm starting to get the routine here. I'm probably talking in cop jargon. I don't mean to, I apologize. So, but I'm starting to get it now. So peer support is something that I think is so critical in the police department. I was actually a peer support member when we first created it in 2001. And it came to be because officers were struggling with mental health. They would see terrible things, terrible calls, and then they would go home and then they would not be well. So they had mental health issues. So what we realized is the importance of what we call defusing. So if we go on a critical incident call, we take that team, we call our peer support team, and they come out and they do what we call a defuse. And it's not a tactical debrief. It's really a defuse of saying, what did you see? How did you feel at that moment? What happened? And we just talk through what that looks like. And really it's to say, when you get home tonight, this is how you're going to feel. And this is what your family is going to think. And this is what you need to know and take care of yourself. So we've created this peer support team. We now have a team of, I believe it's 16. They all got trained up in August. We added to the team. And I'll actually bring up one of the things that I'll share about peer support here on the next one. But that's what peer support is. We have many officers who are trained in it, and it's very important to our department. The next thing I'll bring up is that we did a regional training exercise with CCOB Emergency Management. We did that with Skystone. We've had several meetings with them. We're going to do a training component with Skystone. We're hoping to do that in March. And so we're going to do a drill because of the fires that occurred. And we're going to do a mock trial, kind of an entire scenario out there with the fire department, emergency management, the police department, and the community, because I really think the importance of them being involved is the success to their safety. And as you know, I'm sure you hear about the street racers. So we actually work with a regional and we have a regional training with our task force. And then we actually work on the weekends to combat the street racing. It's a problem throughout the state of Colorado. And so we continue to work those proactively. And Broomfield, 2 weeks ago, I believe they wrote something like 42 summonses to the street racers. So they're very active and very involved. And lastly, the de-escalation implicit training class for our CCOB. Our poor library staff, I think because of the hours and their availability to anyone who can walk in there, are the ones who sometimes get some of the anger from when they're just there to help the community. So we're going to give them some de-escalation, some anti-bias training, and maybe that'll help them when they have a situation so that they can handle it and still remain safe.
Chief, let me add just real quickly. I don't know if all of you have been keeping up on the news, but the libraries have been targeted significantly in our surrounding communities, so much so that many of them have closed, whether it be for a day or a day and a half, because of the threats that they are experiencing. So our libraries are under siege, if you will, and I don't say that lightly. Throughout the pandemic and continuing, it is something, and so really grateful for the PD. They were able to turn this around when we called Chief Hempelman within like 4 days of saying we need some extra love to our libraries. And so it's odd to say that a diffusing training is showing the love, but it certainly is. I think we could all do for a 2-day diffusing. Chief Hempelman.
I agree, absolutely. Okay, so next slide, please. So some of the community events, we've done a lot the last month or two. I was putting together this list. I actually took out 2 other slides and it just had all this information. But I wanted to focus on a few that are that I think have been a great success to the community. The Coffee with the Cop, I brought this up last time. We had just done 1 at the time. Now we've done 3. And I am just shocked at how many, not even shocked, but just excited about how many folks show up just to talk to the officers who are working there and just to chat about whatever, whether it be crime, whether it be about family, whether it be law enforcement. And we've also used this as a recruiting tool where people walk in and just want to know about law enforcement. With the Workforce Center, we did a Community Connect open house, which is a great success. We actually had a booth up there and just welcoming and sharing job information with our Workforce Center. I know I saw a lot of the faces at Broomfield Days and our 9/11 memorial event. We also do a plane pool fundraiser, which benefits Special Olympics. We had a huge turnout this year of officers attending as well. And we continue our ongoing neighborhood watch meetings. We get requests, I would say weekly, about neighborhood watch meetings. And we always tell them, we welcome that because we have the more the neighbors are sharing and watching and part of what's going on in the community, the more that we keep the community safe. And then we just had our Broomfield Police Department Inside Academy graduation. I don't know if any of you saw that on social media, but that graduation was last week. And we continue, sadly, we have to continue the random acts of violence training, which now we've done for the Workforce Center, Precious Child Volunteers, Health and Human Services. And then there's a whole bunch of businesses that I didn't list here that will call us and just ask, hey, can you come help us do a safety drill at our business? And we do those all the time as well. Next slide, please. A few updates that I wanted to share. So finally, on September 7th, our communication center began dispatching emergency calls utilizing a CAD-to-CAD system. I'm sure you've heard about that a great deal from the fire department for the closest response unit to be there. It's finally live in our dispatch center has worked a great deal to get that going. We expanded our CRT. So CRT is our critical response team. To give you a quick summary of this. So if we ever had, and I need to knock on wood, but if we had an officer involved shooting, we have a critical response team to the 17 judicial that responds. And we do that so that there's an unbiased investigation so that we don't investigate our own incidents. We've now added to that critical response team so that if we have any kind of injury accident due to an officer being involved or a pursuit that happened and then a crash, that team is now also going to respond and investigate that for us so that it is an independent investigation. And the next thing I want to share about is the police department. I know I'm kind of jumping on this, but so the police department tomorrow night, I am so ecstatic for this, is going to do the first ever family night. We asked for the employees to make sure to RSVP so that we know how much snacks to have. And we have over 200 and some employees who responded and will be there. And I have wanted to do this for 5 years. To have this happen tomorrow night is amazing. So I'm going to go back. I mentioned peer support. So I asked peer support to help put this together. And what I love about this is that we have one of our psychologists that works with the police department is going to be coming in. And for an hour, they're going to take, I think we have 50 kiddos who are school age. They go in a separate room and they talk to the psychologist. And then the other 200 adults will be in the room too. And adults could be like teenage kids as well. And they just talk about what to expect when your family member is in law enforcement. And yes, we are a little different sometimes. But we do see terrible things and they're difficult things. And then we go home and we all have families. And that's just a reminder of what to expect when mom or dad or your son or daughter, your sibling, whatever it may be, comes home and they're a little bit different tonight or just not doing well. So I love that we're doing this. So those psychologists will actually be doing the training for that hour. And then we're going to be doing tours of the police department and just really welcome our extended family. So that is something that I'm ecstatic about. I hope that next time I can do an update, I can tell you how wonderful it is. But it is our first annual tomorrow night. And then you'll see on the screen there, the pink patch for breast cancer awareness. All the proceeds for the patch that we sold those for $10 each in-house. And now we're going to extend that to our city folks here. We'll go to breast cancer research and awareness. So I'm ecstatic that we got to do that. And it's a little pink. And I know you ordered a bunch, Ms. Hoffman. I think you ordered like 100. So thank you for the donation.
Thought I was ordering 10, and then by the time I hit submit, I'd seen the others there. So I have plenty for all to share. Chief, highlight just a little bit for us, if you would, the self-defense training, would you?
Yeah, next slide, please. So you read my mind, but I didn't even share this with you.
Okay, thanks.
So I put a few of those quotes in because I was so excited. So we had our self-defense class. We had the 2 basics this last month, September. Seems like a long time ago, but a lot going on. And we have our advanced class in October. We've since then posted to do 4 additional classes and they are already filled. So I think it's a great success. I know there's a news media that wants to do a story on this as well. And I was telling Ms. Hoffman that I went to a Chiefs meeting last week, North Metro Chiefs meeting. And unfortunately, sometimes in those meetings, you just kind of get together to talk about all the things that are important that you need to deal with right now. And I actually said, can we please talk about something that we're doing and share that we can take from each other to say, this is working well in my community. So I shared the self-defense class. And they were ecstatic and they all said, why didn't we think of this? And I said, I just have a better team, and just kind of, teasing each other. But it really was a success. I put those statements up. We had everyone give feedback and we really wanted critical feedback so that we can improve. And I just put a few of those, but all the feedback was really positive. So it went really well. Next slide, please. And I just threw a few of these photos in here, everything from what I just mentioned, the self-defense class, which we call Her Own Hero. Plain Pool, we've received a number of letters to the police department, just thanking us for what we do and the little things. I know I got one just last week about an officer who just stopped and was playing basketball with kids. And I know that seems like a very small thing, but to our community, it's a really big thing. And those are the things that differentiate Broomfield from a lot of other agencies. So I thought I would share some of the photos and just put those up there to show. And that's just from the last month. So that's pretty much my summary. I know I talked really fast. But I do talk a lot about how much I love this agency. And I do think that we are different from others and we go above and beyond. So thank you for allowing me to be here tonight.
Well, thank you, Chief Hampelman. We really appreciate the update. And we will take public comment if anyone would like to comment on the presentation. And if not, we'll go to council member questions. Any member of council? Mayor Pro Tem Jezierski.
Thank you, Chief, for that presentation. I have just a couple of quick things. First of all, I was just really surprised and disappointed to hear about the library. You saying libraries are being targeted. What does that mean and by who?
Well, it's not a particular group, so it's not like a protest. It's much more what I want to say, I can't say publicly.
Is it territorial?
No, it isn't. It's a chasm between homelessness. And this is not for our library, but those other libraries. Again, it's a more complicated place of where society is. There's a lot of book banning conversations that are happening right now. That is, had a conversation with the mayor. We are on the receiving end of a book challenge. And when I first heard about a book challenge, I was pretty excited. I said, I'm in. That was not what we were talking about. So I think Councilmember Jazerski, it's heartbreaking for us that our front lines on the library continue to be subjected to some of the most egregious behavior that we've seen in Broomfield.
Well, yeah, that's definitely, I'm very naive on this because I see our libraries as being quiet, safe places. So apparently I'm way off on that one. And it's, yeah, sad to hear that our frontline librarians are being subjected to threatening behavior. So anyways, the one question I did have for the chief is your first slide, you did present some crime statistics, both with, I think it was theft and whatever it was, I forget what the first one was, but
The burglary and motor vehicle
burglary, motor
theft.
vehicle.
Yeah.
What I would like to know though is a little more context as to how that compares to previous years. So I see that we've had a little spike this year, then it's gone down again. But what I'd like to know is how was that compared to 2021, 2020?
Absolutely.
Such like that.
So motor vehicle theft in 2019, we had 139. In 2020, we had 283. In 2021, we had 380 last year.
Okay.
So you see that increase, and year to date, we are at 277. So to see the decrease in just 1 month is good, because if we had continued at the rate that we were at, we would have exceeded 400, and we were at 380 last year.
So the numbers have been, it sounds like, and I think this is what we've been seeing anecdotally, higher than in previous years, but hopefully what you're indicating is maybe it's starting to go down a little bit after the rise.
We really do see the decrease this time of the year. A lot of it, kids go back to school, things happen, things settle a little bit. The cooler weather does impact us. Summer's always busier. But the big focus for me is what is the number, what is it trending, and what is it going to be at the end of the year? So when we see that trend and like increasing, and that's why I talked last time about that special enforcement team. And so we requested that for our budget. If we get that team, that's really going to be their focus. They're going to look at every single crime category, and then they're going to target areas that we're seeing the increase, and then say the specialty this week will be whatever the topic is.
Okay.
Motor vehicle theft will always be, I think, one of the topics when you have those specialized teams, because a lot of times criminals are traveling with stolen cars. So if you can nip that a little bit, you might be able to control some of the other numbers and the other crime rates.
Right, and you did answer my follow-up question which was going to be, what are we doing to address this? And it sounds like we are looking to address, and I think that's great, because I know that is an issue that, I hear about from neighbors and friends, is the, increased, not as much the violent crimes, but definitely as the property crimes is what you see, is what you hear about, is what you see when you look on Facebook or Nextdoor or something like that. So it's good to see that we are going to do something about it. And then there's the same thing that with the violent crimes, is that been static over the years, or is that up as well, or is that?
That is pretty stagnant. That number, we have not seen a huge increase in that number. Now, remember, we have such low numbers that when we do have, for example, if we had 7 robberies, well, if you have 8 or 9 or 12 for that matter, you're going to see a huge increase when they're still very low. And I try to focus not only on the increase in numbers, but to really look at the total. That's why the total really matters.
Okay. Yeah, no, I agree. I don't hear any issues about violent crimes. I walk around at night. I walk around my neighborhood at night, the trails at night. I do feel safe in the community. So thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lindstedt.
Thank you, Mayor. I would be I think, disappointing a lot of my residents if I didn't just say how grateful I am for the CAD to CAD to finally be live in Skystone. There are a lot of residents who have been very, very concerned about that over the last 3 years. And I can't say how happy I am. So thank you for whatever part, the PD played in getting that system live. I think it'll give people a lot of peace of mind, especially given the situation we had with the Marshall Fire. So it's more timely than ever, and I'm just very grateful. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Anderson.
I just have one question. I appreciate this update and all this information, but the recent, it was in Thornton though, the recent attempted abduction of the student at the STEM launch school kind of raised some fears around some of the community members here as they're dropping kids off for school. Have we seen, was that just like a one-off incident, or has there been are we seeing any type of concerns in that area?
We're not seeing that here in our community. I will tell you, anytime that happens in any community, it automatically makes us be more aware and more vigilant. And with the schools, especially our school resource officers, we really step up our presence, if you will, because it does scare the community. I always relate it to being a mom, right? So if that happened in my community, I would immediately be a little bit more alert, be more aware. So we want to show that we're here. And so in Broomfield, we have not seen that increase or even that kind of crime. And again, I'm very superstitious being a police officer. So we're going to knock on wood again.
Is that it? All right, Councilmember Marsh Holston.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank you for all the work you do. I want to especially call out the traffic enforcement for doing the work that they do. I drive pretty much the length of Midway every morning at 8 a.m. Taking kids to school. And last week, I'm often one of the only cars driving the speed limit. And last week, there's one day last week that I saw, I think 4 or 5 cars pulled over in one morning, and several other officers driving the streets. So I just want to thank you for that and call that out, and appreciate the work you do.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor. I did want to just ask, because if you read next story, it seems like a lot of the cars that are broken into are keys are left there or they're unlocked. And I think it's great that you're doing that, going around and looking at cars to see if there's purses and things and attractive nuisances. But do you track how many of stolen cars were unlocked or stolen, or the means for which people?
We do track it. I don't have that number tonight, but we do track that when we do our report.
I think it'd be interesting to know, just because it seems like anecdotally a fair number of it is just people leaving their cars unlocked. And
sometimes
it attracts people into your neighborhood if they think there's going to be a lot of cars unlocked. So any more encouragement of people to be more careful would be great. I had one other real quick question. I think the self-defense program, and it's great that it's so popular. Is that volunteer, or are you bringing people in to do that?
No, it's our officers. Actually, one of our dispatchers is the one that she used to be a self-defense instructor in another state years ago. And she asked if she could coordinate that. So it's just our officers. It's her and a team of 5. And they are just trained, and most of them are self-defense instructors already. And so they just go in, and it's really more, it's not just about knowing the technique, but it's really more about everything else, right? The screaming, the making eye contact, just safety things that we forget to talk about. So it's more than just the physical self-defense.
They're donating their time to this?
The officers, they're doing it on duty time, Yep. Some of them flex it off. If they have a shift, they'll take off, and instead of being on the shift, they'll do that. But yes, they are on duty when they're doing it.
Terrific. And one last question I have to ask for my sleep deprived wife. You may not know the answer, but she was woken to a ton of sirens at 3 a.m. going down our empty street. So I have to ask, do they have to run the sirens at 3 a.m.?
So we only go lights and sirens. Otherwise, we always have to drive the speed limit. If we're going lights, we have to go sirens. So it's our policy, lights and sirens. Now, the only time we would turn off our siren is if we get into the neighborhood and it's a safety factor, such as maybe a burglary in progress or something where we didn't want someone to know we were getting there. But that is the only time they would be lights and sirens. The fire department, that's something else.
Yes.
Can't do anything about that.
Councilmember Cohen, we've had that conversation for probably starting 7 years ago, falling into safety and nuisance and defaulting from a police department perspective that sometimes you just got to swallow hard.
It just was a lot of sirens
Yeah,
at 3 a.m.
Yeah,
We're on an
it's
empty stretch of road.
startling.
It was like, what in the world is going on?
yeah.
Right, Councilmember Lim.
It seemed from, at least from several of my neighbors, that the catalytic converter etching program slots filled up very quickly. And I know we're doing that with a partner. Do we have any ability to reschedule them back in? That, because I've heard other people say, a lot of people say that they wanted to get in and couldn't.
Yeah, they filled up really quick. So what we'll post after, well, and I think it's already posted now, is everyone could still go on and I don't know the link right off the top of my head, but I think it's through CBI, through the state, and they also can participate in the program. The one that we're hosting takes a great deal of resources. We have detectives, we have to get Cat Paw here, we have to get the members of CBI here. So we're really doing it as a community program to at least let the community know it exists. So hopefully, knowing that now it's filled, they could still go on and still sign up through CBI. And we will put that on our social media so the community is aware.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other council member questions? Well, I have a question, Chief. I think it might have been your last update where you mentioned you guys were looking into possibly creating more stringent penalties for motor vehicle theft, or is there any update on that? It's probably more complicated than
It is,
sounds.
and
Yeah.
it's expensive.
Okay.
And we want to, there's a lot of moving pieces that need to be in place before pulling that trigger.
No doubt.
But we anticipate coming back to council certainly by the end of the year for a heads up on what's happening. And I know that anytime that we talk publicly about this, our DA probably won't be thrilled with this direction. But again, it is something that we'll continue to work in partnership with our municipal court, our county district court. But part of it is anytime that we can take control over such an overwhelming issue for us, it requires due diligence, and all of the indications are, Mayor, from the research that Nancy and her crew have done and the conversations that the chief and I have had, it is something that we will be recommending.
Wonderful. Well, I appreciate the update, and I figured it is not something we could just, poof, make it happen, but I appreciate the update, and I look forward to hearing more.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Chief. All right, well, the end of our agenda. There are no requests for future action this evening, and that concludes the rest of the business. Is there any other business to come before the council? There being no further business, the council meeting is adjourned. We'll take a 10-minute break and then reconvene our executive session in the conference room. Thank you.